Well, this beautiful 66 Deluxe Reverb came back to visit me. It was last here 5 years ago in 2017. I've not seen it since then. Owner's been very happy with it. But as you can see in the video he provided, it's not very happy at the moment. One of the output tubes is severely red plating. I'm sure that tube is toast. We'll make sure that there's nothing inside the amp which caused that tube to fail. And we'll make sure that that tube failure did not damage anything inside this lovely amp. The repair 5 years ago was pretty interesting. That was before I started videoing everything, so I've just got a lot of photos on that. But I will share all of that with you here so you can see what it took 5 years ago to get it to a great condition. So let's open this up and see where we're at. So before we go any farther, here is the left 6v6 tongue saw that was not cherry plating, but the one on the right that was glowing like Rudolph, very darkened surface of the plate. This tube is quite literally toast. We will not be trying this again. You can see here the output transformer was replaced at some point in the past before my getting the amp with the Haber. The power, choke, and reverb transformer are original to the amp. Let's see what's happening underneath the doghouse. Okay. Well, I need to go back farther in my notes, apparently, because the last time I had this amp in 2017, I did not recap it, but apparently I did recap it at some point before 2017. So let me check my notes and get a date code on that. Well, everything inside really looks pretty still. I don't think there's anything damaged, but let's check a few things. Let's make sure these screen grid resistors are still good. I did not install these, I don't believe. 494, 495, 2.1, 2.1. So apparently 5 years ago I did change the grid stoppers and I was emulating the drifted values that had been in the amp before, where the 1.5K is drifted up. Let me check a few things here. Literally doing a close inspection and sniff test in this area. I don't see anything crazy. Let me take a check on these bias resistors here. The grid leaks. 230, 224. All right, so all that's okay. I'm going to plug the amp in and power it on and make sure that we have a good bias reference and all that fun stuff before I put any new tubes in here. Don't want to feed tubes into a damaged circuit if we can avoid that. So no speaker. Speaker's not necessary for this without output tubes. We're just going to go through here, make sure we have a good bias supply and that it's even on both grids, and then we'll add an unloaded B plus and see how things are behaving. So negative 37, negative 37. All right, let's take it out of standby and just check a few things. 410 rather, 410, 48, 408. All right, I think we can probably put some tubes in this and see where we're at. I'll need to get some temporary 6v6s hooked up for this thing. All right, so let's power this on. I've got my current limiter light bulb thing set up. I'm watching everything. I'm checking that grid leak. That grid on I'm checking the grids as they come up. Make sure they don't start to change. Everything seems pretty cool. I'm going to keep an eye on that, of course. Let's see what the amp is sounding like other than the catastrophic tube failure. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln. Had a little bit of scritchiness on the normal channel treble cap, but I don't think he's been using that channel much. That's gone away now. So that's the normal. That's sounding good. Let's try the vibrato channel. Sans reverb at first. That sounds really good, really promising. I'm pretty sure all we need to do is order a new pair of 6v6s for this amp and get them all biased up and happy, at which point you'll get to hear this thing, and I bet I can sweet talk the owner into coming and playing for us, because he's really, really quite good. I love this era of Deluxe Reverb, this era of Fender in general, with these beautiful nickel-plated chassis. That coating is just lustrous and deep, and they've not made anything as lovely since. And few amp companies have ever made anything quite as just pretty as this. So let's go through the repair 6 years ago as the amp came into me. So the amp had been partially serviced, kind of oddly. You can see it had a whole bunch of Zycon caps in there, and you can see it had a replacement output transformer. It had a mixture of original carbon composites, some carbon films, some metal films. It had one original cathode bypass cap. It had some pretty good replacement cathode bypass caps. It had a new film cap there in the LFO, Zycons pretty much throughout, and those changes continued throughout the entire amp. Someone had taken out almost all the old blue Ajax caps, not really necessary, put in these giant metal oxide plate resistors, just a lot of stuff that I didn't really think was the best approach for a 66 Deluxe Reverb. For those wondering, all the black cloth wire, that's all original to the amp. There was some stuff happening in 66 where different wire colors were used, and kind of makes it cool. What first struck me as very strange was the substance that was on a lot of the wires and all over the brass control panel there. You can see it there kind of glistening, just this really weird oily substance. Probably some kind of dielectric grease or some other nonsense like that. Really not a good thing. You can also see that this is all done with my old Samsung Galaxy. And so a lot of the highlights are all blown out and all the colors are oversaturated. Sorry about that. So I started by taking everything off the front panel. Just all the knobs, all the hardware. And then I pulled out the brass control panel. And in doing so, I found a lot of really nasty corrosion by the normal channel input jacks. Some kind of liquid spill had happened, and it was just this really dark, yucky, discolored stuff. So here, I'm halfway through cleaning it all out. You can see the rest of the brass looks quite clean. All the old solder's off, and I almost have all that corrosion off. And here you can see all the corrosion's off, and it looks almost like new, though you can still see, obviously, where the solder was, and you can see some striations from the scouring I had to give it with some Brasso, and you can see where the tooth washers had made their impressions, but this was a much better place to be. Everything would be clean and all the grease was gone. And all the wires that had that grease on it, I just soaked the hell out of them with isopropyl alcohol and let them all evaporate. That got all the grease out. It just took about 3 dousings and a lot of repetition. Then I turned my attention to the nasty, nasty chassis front. It was just really dirty on both on the chassis and on the rear of the faceplate. Just a lot of corrosion over the years. I'm not quite sure how that happens, but it sure did. So here is a much cleaner place to be. And I went through and all the random Zycon caps were taken out. I put in these pretty Vichy MKT 1813s, put a whole bunch of carbon composites back the way it was originally in 66, made sure everything was clean. I'm not sure if there's a picture of this, but it needed a new power and standby switch as well. That dielectric grease that was used that I cleaned off of the wires and the control panel, I think that's what's discoloring those 2 remaining blue Ajax molded caps there. The white labels, I think that was just the grease that got on them. Kind of yucky, but fixable. On the lower right, you can see that 100K slope resistor going to the mid and bass cap in the tone stack there. And notice I have that resistor up a bit off the board with some arcing in its leads. That way, if the board continued to warp, those horizontally mounted resistors wouldn't get torn out of the solder joints, which can happen with these. And down at the other end, more of the same. I got that 5 microfarad or 4.7 microfarad there on V5B. Lovely carbon composites, which sounded period correct in this. You can see I've got some nice curves to the leads on that 47 ohm. That is the last resistor in the phase inverter going to ground. That any of the horizontally mounted resistors like to pull out of these boards, and I don't like to let that happen. And here's a last ugly, by my current standards, shot of the amp. I just took it outside, took this picture on my front porch, and man, I do not miss using that old camera. But the amp survived all that and has not needed service for 6 years. So I will call that a job well done, and we'll get some new 6v6s for this amp, and it'll go another 6 years or so, hopefully, before it needs any other work. Hey, it may be another 20. We shall find out.